Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It is great to have everyone here in the chat. I have another very brave theist who has come on to talk tonight. Hello to Converse Contender.
Hey, how are you?
Thank you for coming. I always appreciate when theists come because, I frequently will get into discussions with theists and they get too long, to hash out on Twitter. And so I invite them on the show and most of them say, no, I'm too shy to be on camera, or that's not really my thing. And I get that, it is not for everybody. So it's always great when I can find someone that is brave and is willing to come on and answer questions about their theology. So welcome, Converse Contender.
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually enjoy this the most because usually I'm not spending my time talking with theists. I actually spend most of my time in Discords hanging out with mostly atheists. So I'll try to answer slow and think about my answer. But as I told you before, I'm used to being in a room of like 15, 20 atheists and me being the only theist. So I'll get a question. I'm like, okay, the answer to that, blah, blah, real quick. And then I get another question. And I'm like, because I feel like if I don't answer them quick, then it'll get gish galloped down the road. And then they'll be like, yeah, remember how you couldn't answer that? And I'm like, I didn't have any time to answer it. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay. I met Converse Contender in a side chat. Converse Contender said, why don't you have somebody on that's not a fundamentalist? And actually I have, because I've had the dry apologist on before and he's Catholic. I definitely would not consider Catholic to be fundamentalist. I don't know about S.J. Thomason. I do not consider her to be fundamentalist either, and she's been on the show as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I might clarify there. Yeah, dry apologist, SJ, they're both friends of mine. They've both spent a lot of time on my channel and live streams. I actually, if I didn't put there, I should have put Western fundamentalist if I didn't. So if
you might have.
Okay. Because I make a distinction between fundamentalism and Western fundamentalism, and maybe we'll get into some of that later.
Okay. The topic that we've chosen for discussion today is free will. Does free will exist? And I believe that free will exists in the form of, humans can decide what they want to do. However, I also think that free will is completely inconsistent with the idea of an omniscient God. But before we go into that, I don't really know where you are coming from, Converse. I watched a couple of your videos, but most of what I saw was you talking to guests and talking about the guest ideas, which, I totally get. When you have a guest on, especially, a well-informed guest, that's the intention of the show, is to let the guest talk and talk about the guest's ideas. But because of that, I really don't have a very good idea of where you're coming from. So what is your basic theology?
Okay, so yeah, the last a lot of the last videos I've had are actually interviews, so they're going to be obviously not really much about my views. So that probably wasn't very helpful. But so I am what's called a Molinist.
Okay.
And I know SJ mentioned
also.
it to you. Yeah, I know she mentioned it to you. I know you guys are kind of like trying to figure out some of the concepts and things in that stream, and so you at least be somewhat familiar with it. And it's basically a view that was proposed by a Reformation thinker, Luis de Molina, and he had actually, I've got his book here by Dr. Kurt McGregor. He wrote a book on Molina. It's a really, really good read, and I'm having Kurt McGregor on in a few weeks, but actually next week. But he basically seen what Thomas Aquinas was doing with this thing called middle knowledge. And unlike the other reformers like Calvin and Luther, which you think would go against Aquinas because he was Catholic and they're reforming to Protestantism, Molina was actually the only one to go, I'm going against the view of Thomas Aquinas. So that's going to be my view. If you want me to go into the view at all, as far as like, are you pretty familiar?
Not really. I read a little bit about what it is, and I saw a couple of differences, but what basically differentiates other than the idea of middle knowledge, what differentiates Molinism from most of the mainline Protestant denominations?
Well, middle knowledge is going to be, so let me start here. Molinism is the view that God has three modes of knowledge. Okay.
Mhm.
One is what you could do. You could say this is the first logical moment. What you could do in any circumstance. God would know this. So, for example, if you were married, you couldn't be a bachelor, right? He knows things like this because it's what you could possibly do. Um, the next mode of knowledge, which is middle knowledge, is what you would do in any circumstance he put you in. Okay, so if he were to put you, if you like vanilla ice cream, so if he put you at an ice cream parlor, you would get it vanilla ice cream or whatever, right? Then the third mode of knowledge is when he decides to actualize what you might call a possible world, which is just a term in philosophy to mean something like a particular set of events or like a particular situation in that's a crude way to put it, but for the audience, he knows what you will do after he actualizes the start of that world and it unfolds. You see, so he knows what you could do, then he knows what you would do in that circumstance, and when he decides that's the world he's creating from the beginning, then what unfolds, he knows what you then will do. So
Does he know all of those things simultaneously, or are there separate points of time when he has different knowledges?
yeah, so these God's knowledge is spoken about in a logical moment. So it's not a temporal moment. So what I mean by that is something like, say that one example I've heard is something like the speed limit in Massachusetts is 55. Okay. And then you're going to be going through Massachusetts, so you're going to have to obey that speed limit. Well, it logically is prior that you have to be in Massachusetts on that highway to be doing 55 on that highway. It doesn't matter if you're there in an hour or whenever. It's just logically prior that in order to be doing the speed limit on that highway, you have to in fact be there first. So in that way, it's logically prior.
Do you believe that God is omnipresent?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you believe that God is timeless? In
Mhm.
other words, is he in all places at all times simultaneously?
Yeah, he's. I would say God's timeless. Yes.
Okay. So that he is both at the moment of creation and in this moment and at some point in the future, all simultaneously.
Depending on what you mean by that, yeah, I'm going to say yes to that
Okay.
because there could be
So
a
if
lot of.
he has these three different knowledges, we are limited by time. You gave the example of, well, I can't travel the freeway in Massachusetts if I'm not in Massachusetts. But if God knows when I will be in Massachusetts and what I will do when I am in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
then he is not limited by this separation of knowledges because he has all three simultaneously, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And does God know everything that you are going to do before you do it?
Yes. What you
Okay.
will do? Yes.
What you will do. Yeah. Okay. Can you choose to do differently than what God already knows what you will do?
Yes, you could.
And if you did, then God wouldn't know what you are going to do, correct?
I don't think so. Here's why I say that. Say that I know that my wife really doesn't like mint chocolate. Okay, I know that. I have that foreknowledge. So, and then say that we went to an ice cream shop and they only had mint chocolate or chocolate. She doesn't like mint chocolate at all. So I already know, like, so what I'm going to say is, I know that she could choose mint chocolate, but she wouldn't. In the same way, God knows that you could do otherwise, but you wouldn't.
Okay. But that's not the knowledge of what that's only the knowledge of what you could do, not the knowledge of what you will do. And the question that I asked to you was, does God know what you will do, not what you could do?
Right. That's why I made the distinction with would, is because he knows that you could choose the chocolate or the mint chocolate. He knows you could do either. It's logically possible. But he knows you, in your essence, or whatever you want to call it, wouldn't. You see, so could, would, and will. So you could do otherwise, but you wouldn't.
Okay. So you're saying now that God does not know what you will do, only what you could do and what factors will go into that decision.
Oh no, he will know what you will do, because if he knows what
Okay,
you
if
would
he knows what you will do, can you decide to do other than what he knows that you will do?
you could, but you wouldn't. You see what I mean?
I see what you
So
mean, but you're contradicting yourself. I mean,
I
because
don't think
if you
so.
can do other than what he knows, then he does not know what you will do. And if
Well,
you can't, then he does. But then you have no free will.
so capability doesn't entail fatalism. So just to put this one way, um, if I know my wife could choose either this or that, and I know that she could, we're at could stage now. I know that she could do one of these. I know that she would choose this one for sure. She's not choosing the other one. She just hates
But
it.
you don't know that.
No, I do know.
You know what she usually does, but you do not know her mind. You do not know every factor that goes into her decision. And so you cannot know what she will do.
Okay, if you want to say with 100% certainty, I mean, like I know my wife will never. She almost throws. She's like, ugh, I would never even get close to that. But anyway, let's just say that you're right. That I can't know for sure that she's not going to just develop a new taste for it or something. Well, in that case, that's fine for me. But if we're talking about God knowing all things, He would know, if He had middle knowledge, what
Exactly.
we would do in that
Hmm.
circumstance. So if
And
He
that's why I
knows,
think the human example doesn't make a good example because none
that's
of
fine.
us have perfect knowledge like
Yeah, I was
God
just
is
trying
supposed
to
to have.
relate. Sure. So let's say that God knows that my wife could choose chocolate or mint chocolate, and He knows that she would choose mint chocolate. Okay. She could still choose chocolate, but she just wouldn't do that. And so that when He puts her in that situation, that is when the will comes in. He puts her there. She will choose that because that's what she would have done in that situation.
Okay. And Brenda is right. You're kind of equivocating could and will because I've
I know
asked you
Brenda
a
very
couple
well.
of times if God knows what you will do, and every time you say yes, He does know what you will do, but then you change it to, well, God knows that you could do this. If God knows what you will do, then you have no choice in doing what it is known that you will do.
I understand what you're asking, right? Like, so I
Mhm.
should just say this up front, right? This has been, even secular scholars say this in modal logic will, and modal philosophy will say like this is the case. For example, Alex Malpass, who's a PhD, like he did his doctoral work on this topic modality, and he's a very bright person. I've had him on the channel. He's an atheist PhD philosopher, and he even said in his debate with Dr. Kerr McGregor that having foreknowledge of something does not entail fatalism, which is that you have to do that. So, and I've spoke to dozens of atheists that have looked into the field of modality, even outside of God. We think about this in everyday life, just take God out of it. And you just say, if you know that we could do this if we launch a rocket, and we know that this would happen, then when we actualize that by launching the rocket, then it will do that. Now we could have done otherwise, but we wouldn't have. That's kind of the
Okay,
point.
but you're still going back to the could, and that's not what
Could is
not
the
what's up for
first.
discussion. Well, yeah, but not if it's not part of the discussion. The whole discussion is, does God know what you will do, and can you do other than what you will? And so
Right.
to say, well, you could, because you could have a choice. Well,
So
it negates the will.
So here's the thing. If when you say God knows what you will do, but could you do otherwise? That is taking us back to the could, because you're saying, could you do otherwise? Not would you or will
Okay.
you. You're saying,
Okay.
could you have done otherwise? And so I'm going back to the could. So it's the three
Okay.
stages of knowledge: could, would, and will. I could not choose strawberry because it's not an option. So I could choose either. I would choose, the chocolate or my wife. And then whenever I actualize that world by putting her in the ice cream place, I know what she will do because I know what she would have done if I put her in that situation or took her to the ice cream shop. But she could still choose mint chocolate at the last minute. I just know that she wouldn't. That kind of, you see what I'm saying?
I do. Let's put this more into a theology situation. Let me first ask you, do you believe in Adam and Eve? Do you believe that they were literal people?
So I have, I'm not sure if you watched my interview with Dr. John Walton on this,
I
but
watched part of it, but not all of it.
okay. So I think Adam and Eve are both an archetypal figures and
Okay.
potentially real figures. So,
Okay. So
but
do you
go ahead.
go ahead?
Oh no, I was just going to say that, but a lot of my views aren't going to be tied to most like Western fundamentalist Christianity. I mean,
Okay.
I would almost consider myself a fundamentalist, maybe, but not in the same way as other people, So go
Okay.
ahead with your next question.
Do you believe that there is a moment when sin entered the world?
It depends on what you mean by that, because I listened to your discussion with, is it Tiger, Stephen Tiger? Sorry,
That's okay.
I have a son, and I always want to call him Daniel Tiger whenever I see him on things, because I believe he's been on Modern Day Debate and a few other places before, and so I've seen him, and I'm always wanting to go Daniel Tiger when he came on, but forget that. So yeah, and I got to be honest, like I was rooting for you. I was like, oh, you know the answer to this. You are a Christian. You know the answer to this. But then I disagree with most of what you guys said. And so I think what you mean by that is, were people immortal before they sinned, right?
No, that's not what I'm
Okay.
asking it.
Okay.
Well,
Because that's what you guys were saying in that discussion. So I was just trying to get at your main point.
yeah, no, the point I'm going to get to is, did Adam, or the first person who sinned, or whoever brought sin into the world, did they have any choice in doing that act
Oh, yes.
of eating the fruit or
Okay.
whatever it was that brought sin into the world? Did they have any free will in making that choice?
Yeah, I would say they definitely did. They
Okay.
could have done otherwise.
Okay. So you do believe that there was an act by a human, whether he was named Adam or he's just an Adam, that committed the first sin that brought
Yeah.
sin into the world.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, like, you take you could take it whatever you want. If you see the tree of life or whatever, and you want to say, oh yeah, that was some type of like supercomputer that helps the mitochondrial DNA, blah blah blah, whatever it does, but it's called a tree of life because fallen creatures can't understand these things or whatever. Adam, the archetypal man, the person that originally lost us connection with God or whatever. So yeah.
Do you believe in original sin?
Um,
By that, I mean, I guess I didn't phrase that correctly. What I really meant to ask was, do you believe in imputed sin?
So that's going to depend on, so there's a couple of things here, right? Number one, I don't know if I would say it that way, right? What I would say is something more like, because Adam fell, you're going to have a nature that's not in communion with God or something like that, right? So it's going to change things for sure. But I don't think I want to go as far as saying that because Adam fell, when you're born, you have sin attached to you or something like that, right?
Okay. I'm going to answer a side question from the chat very quickly.
If you don't mind, I'm going to close this vent right here too, because
Okay.
it's making me cold, and I don't have a jacket, I don't think, up here. But sorry, my wife keeps it freezing in here.
Microraptor has asked, doesn't the Bible say that Eve brought sin into the world, or was it both? And that's a really good question, Microraptor, because if you read Romans, it clearly says that through one man, Adam, all sinned, and Adam, it definitely blames Adam for bringing sin into the world. But Eve was the one that ate first. However, God put the responsibility more on Adam if you read the Bible, which makes sense because God doesn't really believe much in women. He's definitely, a favorite of men. But
Really?
part of the reason I think is because God actually never told Eve not to eat the fruit. If you look, the warning to not eat the fruit was given to Adam before Eve was even created. So whether or not Eve ever even heard the directive not to eat the fruit is up for debate because it's not in the Bible.
Yes. Well, so there's a couple of things there. One thing is that I'm glad you clarified that, because when you talk with Steven Tiger, sorry, not
Mhm.
Aerosmith's lead singer, but you guys said you guys both agreed that the blame was put on Eve. So I'm glad you clarified that. And then I'm not sure about the thing about God doesn't prefer women or whatever. I'm not sure about that. Well, that would
Well,
is kind of
considering
off
that
topic,
in the
but
Old Testament, women were property, and men were the only ones that were people. Yeah, definitely God favors men, especially since he set up the system where women were property. And even in the Ten Commandments, God says that women are property.
well, keep in mind that you have um, if you want to say that God mostly spoke to men or whatever your claim is there, God is using the means of the world. So if he were to speak to, let's say that he were to make his prophet early on a woman, right? It wouldn't have made sense in the world they were in because the men were so barbaric and sexist. So I don't see why God should have used a woman
Couldn't
back
God have
2,000 years ago.
commanded the men that the women were people too? Couldn't he have just told them that?
Well, it does say that God created man and women in his image, right? And so,
No, it says he made God a man in his image, male and female, he made them. So it doesn't really specifically say that he made women in his image, but regardless, he still set up a system where he directed that women were property.
what passage are you referring to? I'd like to get the
I'm
passage.
referring to the 10th commandment where it says, do not covet your neighbor's ox, your neighbor's house, or your
Hmm.
neighbor's wife.
Yeah,
She's listed right along with the rest of the property.
yeah. So, do you think that's because God considered her property, or because the people of the
Yes.
time considered her property?
Well, obviously God, was perfectly fine with it because otherwise he could have said, your neighbor's wife is not property. He could have
Yeah,
made that a separate commandment.
yeah. So,
God had no problem with saying no to adultery, and that wasn't something that was favored by the people. He had no problem with saying don't eat shrimp and don't wear mixed fabrics. Why is wearing mixed fabrics so much more important than making women co-equal with men?
yeah. So that was quite a barbaric time, right? And so, do you think that some of the things God did to separate the nations from the Israelites by like making them wear not letting them wear mixed fabrics and eating bottom feeders and things like that? Do you think that, and not just sleeping with all the kind of different women and stuff all the time? Do you think that is on par with making the woman a president or a congressman or something like that in their time? Because my thing is this: is that, as Paul says, like, you give babes milk until they can take solid food. And so what I'm going to say is that, in the same way that if you and I agreed drugs are bad, just say heroin's bad or whatever, right? And you shouldn't do it, it's immoral, whatever. I'm not saying you agree, I'm just saying that. And then we have a drug addict that is on
Hang on for
heroin.
just a second. I'm
Yeah.
having an issue
Oh,
with my
okay.
computer cable. You can keep your answer, but I need to leave for just a second and check why my computer is not getting power.
Okay. Hello, folks. My name's Godless Granny. I'm having on Converse Contender today. He'll be back in just one sec. He's got a really cool rocking chair.
I can hear you. You can continue.
Oh, sorry.
Let's see if that doesn't seem to fix the problem. For some reason, I am running on battery, and I cannot figure out why.
In your computer?
Yeah. Because I just got a message that my battery is low, and I'm running on battery.
Does your computer plug meet at certain points?
Yeah, that's what I was just checking, was the computer plug.
And it's plugged in.
Okay, now it says it's plugged in. Okay, so I should be good now. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So anyway.
So I think that God is smart enough that when he condescends to humans, that he uses what they already know. So, for example, he doesn't come to the early people and then try to introduce them to science or any of these things. He's just trying to separate them from the barbaric people they're with. Oh, lost you. What's up, Maya Atkinson? Recognize you from a couple chats. Brenda, as always. Brenda, I haven't seen you put out anything recently, so I can't put your comment on screen, but I would click it. Hey, what's up, Spartan? Good to see you. Uh-oh. Looks like she's gone for good. Hopefully Granny will be back in here in just a short minute there, folks. Yeah, Maya, long time no see. Sorry. I see you sometimes in like Dragnot's chat and stuff like that, but how's the audio? Is my mic okay? Somebody said, "What's this?" They probably just came in as soon as it's just me. Spartan says, "I won the debate." That is not the case, obviously. Yeah, if you want to put some questions in the side chat, I'll just answer them until Kelly gets back. Excuse me.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
My computer went down entirely.
Oh, no worries. I was running the show.
Okay. I think we may be good now, but we'll see. All right.
So my answer was, I was getting there. It was basically that I think that God condescends to humans, so he would never try and go to a human and say like something like, "Listen, I think the DNA molecule has the number of your hairs numbered," but instead he says things like, "The number of hairs on your head are numbered," or like, for example, when he says like, you should worship God with all your mind and things like that. The word for mind in the Old Testament is actually the word for entrails. The translators help you out. That's what John Walton says. They help you out because they mean the same thing by mind. But it's the same way we think of things like when you say, listen to your heart or go with what your gut says, right? God wasn't trying to change them and go, well, hold on, wait. It's not your heart that does those things, right? You have your mind that operates through your brain or whatever. Anyway, so even with moral issues, I think that God is moving people from where they were to separation first, and then moving them closer and closer. As Christ says in the book of Matthew, that Moses gave you that law of divorce because of the hardness of your heart, but it wasn't that way from the beginning, right? He's saying that there was a standard in the beginning, but because of how barbaric you were, he allowed for something like divorce. But I say not that way. So anyway, that's kind of my view. It's the same way we would do with like a drug addict. Even if we thought drugs were immoral, we wouldn't just say, no, you stop today. We would say something like, all right, we're going to get you on methadone and we're going to move you toward the solution or whatever. Anyway, that's just.
Oh, do not go there. Have you ever seen what these methadone clinics do? They are horrible. They get
Oh,
you stuck
really?
on methadone for life. I was in a hearing recently. I'm a Kaja. I represent children in court, and we had the head of a methadone clinic testifying as to why someone was on methadone, because they were transitioning off of another drug. And so he was asked, what percentage of your patients ever get off of methadone? And he said, oh, about 3%. They're not even trying to get them off of that. They just move them from one drug to another. So anyway,
I hope that
let's answer.
anecdotal evidence isn't extrapolated worldwide, because that would really be bad. But either way, I think the principle still stands that you try to wean people off of things. Muhammad did the same thing with the
All right,
pagans in Medina. But go ahead.
Let's answer Microraptor's question. Microraptor says, I'm a trans woman. Why didn't God make me cis? It sure would have been a lot simpler. If God really wants to make things easier for people, if that's his intent, then why make some people trans?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think I would say that God tries to make things easier on people, but rather what I would say is that God wouldn't have made you trans, but I would say that I agree 100% that transgenderism is something that occurs in the real world. It's a phenomenon. And I would just say something like, we are in a fallen world, so that's not the ideal, right? But I would never try to deny that you actually experience that, as some people try to do. I would just say that, yeah, that's a complete phenomenon, right? But in the same way that there are other things that have changed about the world since the fall, that would be another thing.
Okay.
But all these things are kind of besides the topic. But
yeah, I know we're way off topic, but there is one thing that I think is just, there's one area of the Bible where I think it's completely flipped from what you're saying, and that would be homosexuality. If God really was trying to be sensitive to the people's needs and why tell them to stone homosexuals to death rather than ask them to tolerate them?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's been a lot of talk about, again, this isn't on topic, but like there's a lot of questions about the Old Testament laws and whether they were actually like laws that, if one of these things, like for example, your child was bad, that you had to kill them or something like that. And there's really no evidence that these are more than just like the I forget the case law or something like that. I actually haven't, I don't have my notes on me that I've taken on that subject. So unfortunately, I don't have them up here, but you can look up the fact that these were treated more as case law than of actual, like something that every time this occurred, you had to do it or that's it. But what I would say is just that Christ didn't say that, right? As I said before, Christ is trying to tell people that. What was that?
Paul did. I mean, he didn't specifically say stone them, but he called them an abomination.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here, right? So one thing is that, as I said before, Christ was telling them that they received some things from Moses because of the hardness of their heart, specifically divorce, right? But it wasn't that way from the beginning. And I would just say that again with homosexuality, this is another thing like that, that I think it's a real phenomenon that actually happens. I think that same-sex attraction is not immoral. I think that acting on it according to the Bible is immoral, but that just thinking, that you're attracted to somebody, I don't think that could be considered immoral. But actually acting on it is what Paul or somebody like that might say. That would be the case. So
why would God make someone with a desire and then tell them you can't use that desire?
Yeah, so I think that's a big misconception that we've heard a lot. I don't think that God actually makes people like they are. Exactly. Yeah. So
okay.
For example, people will say things like, well, why did God make weed if he didn't want me to smoke it? Right. And it's like, well, first of all, I don't even want to debate whether that's in the Bible or not, but I'll just say that, like, well, it's like saying, why is there, poison ivy, or why is there, all these fungus or cancer or all these things? Like, there are things that after the fall came into the world because the ground was cursed and things like that, right? So there's going to be a different situation. So saying that, well, why did God want poison ivy or something like that, right? It's just going to say that it just seems like we're going to conflate what a perfect world to God is and what our fallen world is, because obviously it says the lamb will lay with the lion in heaven, and there's sickness. And
do you think God makes people?
Things, yeah. What was that?
Does God make people, or are we just completely a product of biology? Or does God have any hand in making people what they are?
Yes. I mean, God, he created the world, and he started this whole show off, right? So in actualizing this world, he knew that animals would bring forth and humans and so forth. Yeah. So,
okay, but that's not really what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, did God just make the first people and say, so long, have a nice life. I'm going to the other end of the universe, or I'm going to go start another universe. Or does he have a hand in every individual that is born? Does he make,
yes,
does he
he
form?
knows. Yes, he knows everybody before they're born, your essence, your everything that he knows what you will do.
Okay.
That's what I said earlier.
Does he make you though? Or does he just know what you are, or does he make you what you are?
I would say that something like people have essences. God knows what your essence is like, but he doesn't make you exactly.
Okay, so where it says, I formed you in your mother's womb, that's, God didn't really do that, even though he said that.
Well, that doesn't actually say that he made you do anything or anything like that, right?
No, but it says I formed you. He formed
Yeah.
me, which would say that he made you.
Yeah, I agree. God made all people.
Okay, so God did make people.
Yeah, I said that. It says that he made Adam from the dust of the earth, and
Yeah, but you made it sound like he only made Adam, and since then, the rest of us are all products of that biology, but he only made Adam.
No, I believe in evolution. So
yeah,
yeah. So I wouldn't say that. You asked me, did he actually form what we know, and or does he just know us, or does he actually form what we're going to be? And I'm like,
I'm really asking, does he determine which genes you get from your mother and which genes you get from your father? Does he infuse a soul into the person that is formed? Does he determine who your parents are going to be, or are all these things just random acts of biology?
Yeah. So God knew that if he actualized this universe, that you, the essence, would be in this body. For example, you, Godless Granny, would be in the store trying to figure out what cookies you like best. So you're going to be
okay, but that really doesn't answer the
body.
question that I asked. You keep saying that God knows this is what you're going to be, but I'm asking, did God determine what I will be? Did God make me the way I am?
Yeah, I said no, that he didn't make you the way you are. I said he made you, and I think you've been conflating making you and making you the way you are.
Okay. So God makes your biology, but once you're born, you make yourself from that point on. Is that what you're saying?
I don't actually know what you're getting at. Like I said before, I think you have an essence. I think you have an individual essence. And when God gave people the imager, the imago Dei, the image of God, that people are now able to understand moral concepts and things like that, right? But then they're still going to have free will. So they're still going to make their own decisions. Stuff. Just because God made me doesn't mean that he makes every decision I've ever wanted to make.
Yeah, I realize that. But what I'm really asking is, doesn't God also control a lot of the factors that go into our decisions? Like, for example, a lot of what people do is a product of their upbringing. And a lot of it is a product of their genetic makeup. And if God has determined your genetic makeup, and if God has determined who your parents are going to be and where you are going to be raised, then didn't God have a huge hand in how you turned out to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Sorry, my lips are really chapped right now.
That's okay. That's why I
Yeah,
always
completely.
have water. I could not make it through a stream without a glass of water.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I do think that you are limited by the environment that you're created into, and I do think that you're limited by circumstances, right? But that's kind of the point, is that the circumstances that we are in. For example, if I didn't have legs, then I'm probably not going to be a dancer or something like that. Maybe I would get prosthetics and become a dancer or something. I don't know, but you're right. Like having certain limitations are going to limit your options of what you can choose. So yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
Okay. And that's part of the reason that I think that if you are going to say that God is in complete control of what goes on in this world, that humans cannot then have free will also. Because if God is determining all the factors that go into your decisions, as well as foreknowing what decisions you are going to make, even though you might feel like you are making a choice, all of the factors that went into that choice were predetermined for you.
Yeah, I just disagree with that, right? Because if, for use an example we were using, if I were to take my wife to an ice cream shop, she doesn't have the option to choose strawberry, right? Because in that example I gave you earlier, you only have chocolate and mint chocolate. So it is limiting, but you still have a choice between two options, right, to do otherwise. And so unless you have some different definition of free will, I still think that you would have free will. Uh-oh. Are you thinking, or you froze? I'm going to guess froze. Oh, man. Sorry, you guys. I was tempted to run downstairs really quick and turn off the air conditioning. I'm kind of cold up here. It's the 2-story house life. I don't like this setup. But, all right, let me look at some questions here. I seen one earlier where somebody said, so God knew I was going to be an atheist. Yes, God did know that would occur. We really need to get to what that implies, though. And I'm not sure if we are or not. I'm open to staying and doing it, so it's going to be up to Gigi whether she wants to do it or not. What about mental health? Sorry, misread that. I really should wear my glasses, but can never find them. All right, but would you take God's legs and then blame him for not being a dancer? Of course not, right? Because that wouldn't be an option for him to do otherwise. So I'm going to say that that's not analogous to the situation that we have. So being able to do otherwise is being able to do other than God's will, basically. So if God puts you in this circumstance, he knows that you will do other than his will or whatever, right? But if he wants to create free creatures at any point in any possible world, he knows that a free creature that can do other than his will, at some point someone will do other than his will. If not, as Godless Granny said in her discussion with Steven Tiger, that they would be perfect. So anyway.
Okay. And this time it wasn't the power. This time it was my internet went down.
Oh, no worries. I'll hold it down for you.
I really apologize that, I had this happen to me once before, and fortunately, I had 4 guests on. They just continued the show, so I do appreciate you being such a
Mhm.
being willing to carry the show. But of course, then again, I've also given you a free platform. So
Oh, no worries. Most of atheist YouTube has been very receptive to me and been very, nice. And I routinely get a lot of kind words because of my approach. And so I just understand that.
Mhm.
I think that atheists make a lot of good points, matter of fact.
That's interesting. Most Christians I hear from tell me that, I don't know anything because the knowledge of God is the beginning of wisdom, and if you don't know God, you don't know anything.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean that you can't make a good point, right? And then the same people that will say that, but you do have the image of God. So even though you can't ground your knowledge, you can't justify your knowledge, you do still have knowledge. Like even Saitin Bruggencate used to use the example where he would say something like, every time I go to get surgery, I don't check and see if the doctor's an atheist because I know you have knowledge, right? He would just say that like, of course you have the image of God, but then he would say you can't justify it or something like that. So that's not what I do. I just say, look, if you make a good point, a logical point, something like that, then I'm going to accept it and just adjust my idea. I might even adjust some of my ideas, that we have in this discussion. But
Microraptor says you seem very nice,
thanks
unlike
for that.
unlike a certain person who has an inflatable banana.
Inflatable banana person. Is that
That's Ray Comfort.
Ray Comfort? Okay, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, keep in mind though, speaking of Ray Comfort, right? Keep in mind that I feel like atheists, although they make good points, sometimes they fall into the same trap as they have with Christians, right? Because they'll say
Yes.
something like, I think the most underused term in all of online great debate community discussions about God and things like this is the word facile, which just basically means something like you give a neat characterization of somebody's argument without accounting for all the complexities of it. So, for example, you might see Ray Comfort or Kent Hovinder might say, "Oh, evolution. So you think my great grandfather's a banana?" You see how that
Microraptor
sounds
says I'm wrong.
ridiculous?
It's Matt Powell, not Ray Comfort.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Never mind.
Well, no, I thought it was Comfort because Comfort is the one that does the thing with, a banana fits perfectly into your hand.
Right.
Dr. Osiris is saying that Matt Powell has a giant inflatable banana in his backyard that he calls Dr. Peel.
Is that a Fortnite reference, maybe? Or that may be.
I have no idea.
Okay. Sorry.
No idea. Sorry.
But I'm not
My
really
son isn't
familiar with
close
Matt
enough to
Powell.
ask. Whenever I
Mine
get,
either.
yeah, those are questions I normally ask my son. Anyway,
I'm
but
not really familiar with Matt Powell, but just I think I've maybe seen one video by the person. So
yeah, the one place that I really wanted to go with this whole discussion was this: is if God determined that Jesus was going to hang on the cross to die for man's sins before he created the earth, that he had in mind that, man is going to sin, there's going to be a fall, and, I'm going to send my son to pay for that sin, then did humans have any choice in the matter of sin? Now
yes,
your view definitely brings in more possibility of choice than the view that I'm normally used to hearing, which is that Adam was one single person.
right. We just keep in mind what Paul said, right? Sorry, I'm trying to remember the exact verse, but I don't think it's going to come to me. I believe it was Paul that said, if the leaders had known, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory. He's using a subjunctive conditional, or what's called a counterfactual statement, which is just to say an if-then. That's what middle knowledge is. It's an if-then statement. If the leaders would have known God's plan, then they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory, and thus we wouldn't have salvation, that kind of thing. And you see this all throughout the Bible. That's why middle knowledge just makes so much sense. In fact, A lot of Calvinists, well, I shouldn't say a lot, some Calvinists, there's been a big aversion to middle knowledge from Calvinists because I think a lot of misunderstandings, because they think that it's like God looking forward and like learning something new about creatures, where we don't think of God as learning things, right? But even Alvin Plantinga, who was a Calvinist, one of the greatest Christian scholars, at least in the last 100 years or so, he even became a Calvinist and a Molinist, because he was like, I don't see why I can't be both, because it seems like in the Bible, there's all these occurrences of God knowing a possibility in a possible world if somebody would have chose something different. So yeah, if they would have done something different, like knowing God's plan, then they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory, as Paul says.
Okay, but that kind of reverses the question that I've asked. Because my question isn't, would man do something different, but could man do something? In other words, is it possible that man would never have sinned? Wouldn't that have destroyed God's entire plan for the universe if man never sinned?
So I think this is why Molinism is such a powerful argument, is because you said if man could have, if man could have sinned or done something,
Chosen not to sin. Yeah.
Could have chosen not to sin, which I'll say yes, because they had the capability to choose not to sin. Would it thwart God's will? And I'd say, if they would have chosen that, right, then yes, it would have thwarted God's will. But because God has this knowledge of what these free creatures would do in that circumstance, he created this world knowing that they would freely choose to do this or that. And then he can choose what world brings about his goals or his will based on these things.
You make it sound like there's a time lapse there, that, God created man knowing that they could sin. And then once they did, well, then he made a plan to deal with the sin.
No. So like God knew even before he created anyone or the universe or anything. He just imagine God looking at the possible, like let's just say I created a simulated video game world, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to create a world and I go, okay, if I create a world like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, because I used to be a skateboarder, and I'm like, if I put a huge vert ramp here, Bob Burnquist will try to do a 720 and he will fall off the edge and die and break his neck. So maybe I'll put a small half pipe here or whatever. Anyway, he knows what would occur ahead of time. So he doesn't have to make like these incremental changes along the way, because he knows if I actualize this world, all of these things until the end are going to happen and bring about my will. Right. So if I want Bob Burnquist, for example, to survive so that he can bring about a savior or whatever, then I'm not going to put a vert ramp there. I'll create the next world over, world 400,733 or whatever, right, where there's a half pipe instead of a vert ramp, and it still brings about my will through free creatures.
Okay, if the possibility exists that you can do something, but you won't, can you really say that you've freely chosen to do what you know you would not have done otherwise?
Are you asking me, could you still say that you're free?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. I think that's, I think that even most atheist philosophers would agree with that.
Okay.
William of Ockham had a thing about this a while back, but yeah, I think so for sure. If you could do otherwise, I think that just being able to do otherwise gives you is what freedom is, being able to do otherwise. And so if you could do otherwise, but you wouldn't do otherwise in this circumstance, then yeah, I mean, that's pretty much every fact. That's pretty much every subjunctive situation, right? A conditional situation is that you're going to be in a situation where you could choose X or Y, but you're going to choose Y because that's what you prefer to do or whatever. Yeah. So even if God didn't know it, right? Just say that you're going to do it anyway. Like you're going to, you could have done otherwise, but you wouldn't have either way if God knows it or not. So
And Zach Bergman has anticipated the end of my line of reasoning perfectly. Under that logic, God is punishing us for sinning when he specifically arranged the world so that he knows that we would. He knew that this is what we will do, and then he's punishing us for doing exactly what he made us, created us to do.
Yeah, so that's a common comment that we get. It's going to say that I think what he's trying to imply there is that God's responsible because he created a free world in which I would freely choose to do otherwise than his will. And because he knew it ahead of time, that makes God responsible or something. And I'm going to say that I don't see the responsibility being put on God because that he knew that you would do something in this world. Because
Do
if he
you
wants to create any world with free creatures at all, it's going to entail that freedom entails that there's the ability to do otherwise.
Okay. If God gives you freedom to make a choice, but then punishes you if you exercise that freedom, has he really given you that freedom?
Sorry, I might have misunderstood what you
Okay.
said there.
All right. Let's put it into analogy. Suppose you give your child a toy and you tell your child, do not play with that toy. You may have this toy. This is a gift, but you may not use it. Have you really given your child a toy? I mean, have you really given him the gift?
If you gave him a toy, but you tell him that he
He
can't
cannot
use
use it. He
then he
can't play with
couldn't.
it.
Yeah, so he wouldn't because he couldn't. But if you gave him the toy, let's say that it was a toy and you told him that he could use it and he
And he will
did.
be punished severely if he ever plays with it.
Well, yeah, if it's a toy, I mean, of course, I'm going to think that's a completely different analogy. But like if you gave him a knife or something like that and you said, don't play with this, and he did anyway, then he's punished for doing it or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason I use the example of a toy is because if free will is the option to choose, should I do A or should I do B? And God is giving us this free will, but telling us simultaneously, here, this is a gift. You may do whatever you choose, but if you actually exercise the free will that I've given you, you will be punished severely. So you better not do anything other than what I want you to.
Yeah, I still don't think the analogy is very apt, right? Because it's just like given choices. It's like you can do this. Like even let's just it's easier as somebody just mentioned in the side chat, like to go back to the garden. And I think that's actually easier because we can look at this garden scenario and you can put anything you want in its place, right? And you can just say that well, what if God didn't make a garden, right? What if he made, or what if he didn't make a tree of knowledge and good and evil or whatever, right? What if he made, it's just take it as a symbol for whatever thing God doesn't want you to do otherwise, because it's going to, it's not what God would do in a perfect, it's not what God would want you to do in a perfect world. So then you do it anyway, although he tells you you can do anything else you want. You can eat from all the other trees. You can eat from the tree of mortality, immortality or whatever, and say here whatever. But if you choose to do other what I said, then you will be banished and lose your mortality and things like this, immortality. So I think you can put anything in place of that tree, and still to do otherwise, you're going up against having everything, all these other trees and all this other stuff, and immortality to choose death and to plow fields and to have to populate the earth and survive till the savior can come, right? And all these things. So I mean, I think that the choice was better to not do so, right?
I still don't think that under the Christian view that man ever had a choice. And I do get where you're coming from, and I do get that that you're you're not looking at Adam as being a specific person that, the choice was made by this one person, that there were many people there, and it could have been any one of them.
Well, I accept that Adam's probably a person. I'm just saying that he's an archetype for people. So
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is you're looking at that there wasn't a time when there was a single person, that was the only person existing on Earth was Adam and Eve, correct?
well, I would just say that I could be wrong, but
Mhm.
and I have a lot of friends that are, younger creationists who don't believe in evolution the way that it's taught in universities. But I would just say that, well, no, because I would put it the way that God used evolution to bring about a creature that could receive the imago Dei, or the image of God. And then with that creature, he did something different. He gave them the image of God, whatever that may be, and kept them in the garden in communication. All the garden is you're in communication with God. You have access to the immortality. It's called a tree of life, but whatever this tree is representative of for these primitive people, a supercomputer that, whatever you want to say, right? Think of any scientific thing you can think of and then add it there if you want. That helps you to understand. But yeah, it's fine. I think that God took somebody at some point that was capable of receiving the image.
Do you think God wants to have a relationship with people?
Yes.
Okay. If God wants to have a relationship with people, why does he not communicate that other than through a book that was written 2,000 years ago that most people today cannot understand, and very few can read it in its original language?
Well, good point. Why wouldn't God why would he do all that, right? But so
I mean, why not write something himself that's in
yeah.
stone, that's going to be perfectly preserved and we can all see it?
Yeah. So, for example, so the first thing is that and I'm sure you already know this, I just want to clarify for the listeners that the Bible's not a book, but it's a library of books that took place over a long period of time, right? And written by many different authors and different things like apocalyptic literature, poetic literature, historical narrative, all these types of things. Um, I would say that as far as why didn't God write something on stone so that we could see it today and we could all believe or whatever. And I would just say that, well, like you have the Egyptians and the Akkadians and other people that did write on stone, and we still have them today, and most people don't buy it, and they have their religions. But also the next thing I would say is that there's many unbelievers that would say, even if God did exist and I knew that he existed, I would think of him like a tyrant or some type of North Korean leader. Like Matt Dillahunty said, yeah, even if I knew the God of the Bible existed and he was right in front of me, I would never worship him. You see? And so I don't think that would really get us anywhere. So I think that God knew that if he were to have these authors, his prophets, write down through history all these things, that when the book appealed, it would appeal to people in this time or that time or whatever, right? And perhaps that's the thing that would appeal throughout all the way from the early times until today. One thing I would say is that you may know this, but it's getting kind of trendy to do old stuff now. Like I'm a woodworker, and I've seen more and more that people, they don't want like a fancy new modern bench or something. They want like an old school one with like a live edge from a sawmill, and things like that. So older thing, I think it's another problem with like a lot of people want to read the King James version of the Bible because it sounds like, with the these and thous, it sounds like an old rustic antique type, it's the original authorized version or whatever. And I'm just like, if you can't even get the concepts from some of the sentences for young people, because they just get into it and they're like, I don't even know what I was reading there. So anyway, it's a tangent.
My issue with the Bible isn't the age of the Bible, but rather my biggest issue is that there are many different sects of Christianity, and we had to go through the first 10 minutes of the show just to find out which flavor of Christianity is the one that you subscribe to. Excuse me. And supposedly there is one Holy Spirit, that when believers pray to this Holy Spirit, that this Holy Spirit will guide you into all truth, and that when you read the Bible, this Holy Spirit is supposed to guide you into the knowledge that the Bible would impart to you. And yet we have all these different sects of Christianity who understand different things from reading the same text, and they're all supposedly guided by this same Holy Spirit.
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I don't think that you're going to have universal agreement from anybody on any topic, really. You know,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say that I think that the people who, like, for example, say some of the essentials of Christianity, like Christ dying, Christ rising, Christ being a real person, you know, all these things. I think those things are clear. And then I think that people who are going to disagree with those things are going to be doing so on the basis that I think that's when people would say, hey, look, this guy doesn't seem to have the Spirit, or this lady doesn't seem to have the Spirit, or something like that, right? But yeah, I can understand what you mean, like especially in passages that are unfamiliar to us, you know, like there's a big problem with a lot of there's a lot of issues with contextualizing. That's why my channel is mostly about contextualizing. All the scholars I've had on, the Egyptologist was talking about the Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian context and showing how it didn't just pop into their minds one day that, oh, why don't we create a box and do all these things to it to make it sacred space for God? No, they just lived in Egypt for over 400 years. Okay, we understand some of these things. Dr. Michael Heiser that's coming on, he kind of does the same thing. He contextualizes, you know, a lot of the ancient Near East. John Walton had on the other day, same thing. All the people that I'm having on are to contextualize and help us understand how Western modernity has changed our views on a lot of things and influenced us to read things. So I would say that you're right that a lot of people have conflicting views on a lot, but I think the essentials are there for most people.
I disagree.
Okay.
And this is a point that I make with a number of Christians is, you know, the Calvinists say that only the chosen can be saved. The Catholics say that only members of the Catholic Church and people who take the sacrament can be saved. The Assemblies of God say only those who speak in tongues can be saved. Church of Christ says only people who are members of Church of Christ can be saved. And who can or cannot be saved, I would consider to be the most basic fundamental question of Christianity. And
Yeah, good point.
if the different Christian sects can't agree as to who is saved and who isn't saved, then, you know, how can you know
Yeah.
anything about Christianity?
Good point. So the first one was Calvinism, and Calvinism will say that, oh yeah, there's a chosen people, right? There's the elect, which is spoken about in the Bible. But keep in mind that they don't think that people who disagree with Calvinism are not part of that elect. They go, hey, yeah, if you believe in Christ rising from the dead and for paying for your sins or whatever, then you are part of the elect, even if you don't believe in what we believe in this
I
theology.
realize that.
And then I understand, yeah. And then the Catholic Church, I think if you talk to dry apologists again, majority of people I've talked to that are Catholic they actually don't believe that people who aren't in the Catholic Church will not be saved. But they think that rather that there are some people that are excommunicated that won't be, who were in the Catholic Church but are no more. And so, you know, there are some distinctions like that, but I think they even realize that, you know, if you believe in God, and then some Protestants would even go as far as saying like, well, Catholics aren't saved. But then when you really pry in, you're like, well, look, he believes Christ rose from the dead, all these things that it says, right? Oh, well, I mean, he probably is saved. But I'm just saying, if you think, you know, the Pope is the vicar of Christ or whatever, you know, they'll come up with something different. And then like the Church of Christ, you know, they'll even say that like you have to be baptized to be saved. Not necessarily be in their church, but something like, I don't want to misrepresent them, but something like if you have to be baptized and repent or something like that. And, you know, in that case, I'm just looking at the scriptures like, well, when did the thief on the cross get baptized? You know, like he just said, remember me when you come in your kingdom. And so then at that point, I'm just going to go to scripture and go, what about this? You see? And so I think you make some good points for sure. But I think that some of the people who have thought about this for a long time, they have seen these distinctions and say like, hey, look, is this something that we can all agree on? And are there problems with that view or this view, that kind of thing. So, but it's called, oh man, I'm going to forget, but differences amongst brethren and sistren, but yeah, I'll tell you when I remember. It's adiaphora. That's the name. That's what it's called. It's going to be differences in doctrine amongst believers.
Inquisitor Bacon has a question, and I'm going to give you a little background to his question because I understand that. Inquisitor Bacon asks, can I choose not to be saved? I see no reason to be saved by a God who put me through what he did. And I know that from previous conversations with some of the people in my side chat that some of them have been horribly abused by ministers or by family members. And, they have prayed to God to save them from this abuse, and it did not happen.
Yeah, sure. And I definitely sympathize with those people because, I've had some issues of my own in my upcoming, so trust me, don't think that I've, been a Christian since I was a little kid and grew up in church and and was any type of, Brady Bunch type person that wore the nice clothes and had the great, like everything was great. And of course I've had issues as well. When I was a teenager, I was a punk rocker and playing in bands and skateboarding and wearing cut off clothes and stuff that had tears and stuff in it. And so, and wore mohawks and Liberty spikes and stuff. So I was looked at different, and I had all kind of other things. I was poor and stuff. So anyway, I understand these, and I can sympathize with these people, that have been through tough times and things. And I would just say that, like, I don't remember if it was Inquisitor or not, but I heard someone, I'm sorry, I don't want to misrepresent them as well, but in your stream with SJ, because I've only seen like maybe two or three videos that you've made, but in SJ stream, I think if it wasn't Inquisitor, it was somebody else that kind of gave their story of what happened. And it's it's really bad to hear things like that, of course. And so when you're abused by somebody or something like that, but I would just say that, like, I don't see that somebody choosing to abuse their child or doing something else, somebody else, whatever. I'm not going to see God as being responsible for what they did to somebody, of course, but I'm going to say that what they did was absolutely wrong, and that I'm going to be there. And for like, if it's one of my friends or family, or not just one of my friends or family, if you look at my Twitter, I posted a while back, like, hey, look, I'm not trying to like virtue signal or anything, but if anybody's having a really hard time or something, feel free to reach out to me. And so I said that because anybody that might see that, maybe they're, on the edge and they want to call me or whatever and say, hey, look, well, you got a minute to talk or something, and maybe that helps them. So I would just say that I completely sympathize, but I just can't, I'm not going to put that on God that something like that occurred.
But do you think God could have prevented that or could have intervened in that situation should he so chose?
Good question. Good questions, right? Number one, I would say that God could have chosen to go against his own will and did that, but he wouldn't have because of his will, right? So, and this is
now, when you say his will, do you mean his being the perpetrator or his being God?
Or God's will. God's will. Because here's what I'm thinking is, like, if you look at, just take some, like, here's a trivial example, for example. If you think about Back to the Future, the movie, something like that, when they go back and he makes a decision, he goes back and he makes a decision, any little thing changes the course of history completely, right? So, like, you may remember that you do one little thing, and now all of a sudden this person who was poor is a billionaire, and the entire city's changed or something, those kind of things. So I think that when God doesn't, and my views may change on this, of course. This is something that I've been really kind of trying to develop, but I think that when God changes something, it alters a lot, even a small thing, so that if he can answer a prayer and still accomplish his will, I think that he will, right? So, but I think that if he sees from the beginning that, like, hey, on Tuesday, this guy's going to have a rough day and then he's going to end up in a car crash, can I make him like swerve at the last minute and miss that car and go home, and then he has a good rest of his day or whatever, or he prayed that, something would happen and I could answer it. But if it forced God's will of bringing about the Savior, or, some other thing that's going to bring about the best end of God's goals or whatever, then I think that even Christians, when they pray, they don't say things like, hey, look, can I have this? Or can I, sometimes they will pray and ask for things, but they'll say something like, but your will be done, and that from being a Christian before.
Yeah,
right? So
I do.
Yeah.
If God isn't going to intervene in anything that's going to alter his plan for the universe, is there any purpose to prayer? Because, if God's not going to do anything unless he already planned to do it, what point is there in praying?
Yeah, so I think we need to make a distinction, right, between what, from our perspective and from God's perspective, right? So if God's looking at the worlds that he could create or whatever, just look at, by looking, I just mean like in his knowledge, he knows what worlds, right? And he knows this is the world he's going to choose. And he goes, okay, and I'm just speaking anthropomorphically here, right? But he goes, okay, this person is going to pray and I can answer that and it's not going to alter my will at all, right? Because they live on an island. If I answer their prayer, then I gain them and it doesn't change anything or whatever, right? So I do think that in time, he knows that person will pray to him and thus get his prayer answered. But God knows it from the beginning. And when he actualizes that world, that does take place. But then the other person who, prays for something, like we've prayed for trivial things and, great things, and help on things, and sometimes we got trivial things and then sometimes we didn't get the big things. So like I said, I don't want to gain my will to thwart God's will of salvation, and so anyway, but I definitely sympathize.
Yeah, and then Inquisitor Bacon asks, so then me asking for comfort afterward and not receiving it means it was against God's will? How am I supposed to take that?
Yeah, so if God has a plan to bring about the salvation for humans and that to accomplish all of his goals, okay, and his goals, if we're limited perceivers and God is an absolute perceiver, so you may have heard this analogy before, but it's, I'll give this analogy. It kind of makes my point, is that if I were to tell somebody like, hey, look, if I were to stick a knife in a little girl's chest, would it be wrong? And you just go like, yeah, it would be. And I say, well, if it's the person who's doing it is a doctor performing heart surgery, is it still wrong? Well, not, of course not, because now we have full context. We have the full view of everything. And I guess it's to make this analogous, and like, I hate to do like trivial analogies, but if you guys have seen the last Marvel movies, right? Doctor Strange had the time stone. You haven't seen it, have you?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So he had the time stone, right? And he kind of pulls a Molinist move because he has this time stone, and Thanos has all the other stones on the gauntlet, and he
looks at all the possible results.
Right. He ends up giving it over to Thanos, and everybody's like, why would you give Thanos the time stone? What are you, crazy? And he's like, I looked at every possible world where I could make something happen and then in the end rectify it all and fix it all. And he goes, the only world is when I give over the stone to him and all these people die and suffer. And then in the end, Iron Man comes back and saves the day, and we can rectify everything. And so that's kind of a trivial example, but it kind of makes the point.
The problem with that example, though, is that Doctor Strange didn't create the world and isn't in charge of everything that is going on. He is only looking at the possibility of what could happen, but he has no authority or power to change any of that. And that is the real problem with
Yeah.
God, is that he not only has the foreknowledge, but he's supposed to also have the power to control it. And you say, well, if he doesn't do it this way, then this wouldn't come out the way that he intended. But if he has absolute power and absolute authority, he could make it that way.
Yeah, I think that's I hear that a lot, like why didn't God just snap his fingers and it make anything happen or whatever, right? But like I don't think that's how it works with free creatures. I think that if God didn't use free creatures, that he could literally do anything. Like at any moment he could just like, he had these robotic creatures and there's a million of them and they're all praising him all day, all night, or whatever. But with free creatures, the possibilities, the possible worlds, let's say, are going to be limited because you have free actions. And so if you didn't use free creatures, then you can just do whatever you want. But the analogy that I used, of course, there's something called the problem of analogy, where no analogies for one correlation. But the point of that analogy was to say that because everybody else's perception was like, he gave over the time stone, and look, my wife just died, and all these other people died. But then from the absolute perceiver, the person that's seen all of the ends was like, this is the only way with, what I had. And so
it sounds like what you're saying is, well, God did the best he could.
Yeah, I get that a lot from people, but you have to think about it. If God is using limited free creatures, there is a limited amount of worlds. And it's not that he did the best he could, right? He did the best, right? Because the best is to bring about his goals or his will. In the same way that when you make a choice, you want to bring about your goals or your will.
But if what has happened, when we look at all of the atrocities, all of the human atrocities, all of the natural atrocities, even the pandemic, if that is his will, then his will sucks.
Yeah. So again, we're in a fallen world, right? So his will from the beginning wasn't that, as Christ said.
But he wanted
wasn't
the
that way
world
from the
to
beginning.
fall. He wanted a fallen world because he made it that way.
Right. Well, here's the thing: is God wanted free creatures that were limited, right? He didn't want robotic creatures. So, in that sense, there are only a limited amount of worlds, and that if he chose a world to bring about his goals with free creatures making decisions, he didn't have to do that. He could just have had robot creatures,
You make it sound like humans have caused God to lose his omnipotence, that God's power is limited by the fact that humans exist.
In the same way that if I create a virtual video game world, in that world, I can't enter a virtual world as a physical person. By creating any world with limited things, unless you create them as God, as yourself, and you're just creating you and them, you're by definition limiting things. The same way if I created a video game world, I couldn't expect those creatures to be physical because they're in a virtual world, right? And so they're not going to have all the capabilities as me. So yeah, of course, if you create something that's lesser than you, then it's not going to be you. Because if it were, it'd be unlimited and everything. Yeah. I mean, I think this logically follows.
I was not chuckling at your answer. I was chuckling at one of the comments in the side chat, which asks, how the blue blazes does this guy know what God wanted anyway? I think that's a fair question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fair question for sure. Yeah, and I don't know completely. So I never say that I know everything about God or anything. I often say I don't know, right? But if I can know that, for example, if God has revealed himself to people, then I can look at what he's said to people, that he wants to bring about salvation through Christ and so forth, right? But I can't know everything about God, but yeah.
And Maya makes a good point too. You make it sound like human will is more powerful than God.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't think that's quite a good, I don't think it's really that great of a response, right? Because God actualized the world in which they would be able to make free decisions. So his will, they don't get a will if it weren't for him. So obviously he's not greater than his will.
Okay, and thank you very much to Secular Rarity for the super chat. And Secular Rarity says, just stopping in real quick to say how much I love this channel. Keep it up, Granny. You're awesome. Thank you very much, Secular
Thanks so
Rarity. I
much for that
appreciate it.
$10 super chat.
Yes.
Dropping the 10
And
bomb.
we are coming up on the end of our 90 minutes, and I always
Sure.
like to save the last couple minutes so that my guest and I can give any closing thoughts that we might have, and also to shill for anything you have coming up. So if there's anything that you didn't get a chance to say, go ahead, and also let us know what you have coming up on your channel.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I mean, basic, I'm doing a lot of interviews. You'll see me in Discord. If you're on any Discords, I mainly, a lot of theists will say like, where you been, man? I haven't seen you on YouTube that much in our live streams and stuff. And I'm like, I'm spending hours, and I'll probably post some of the videos later, but I'm spending hours in Discord servers with all atheists, getting what you're doing right now, questions, just what about this? What about that? Have you thought about this? You know? And so after 100 or 200 or something of these conversations, it makes me sharper. It makes me think better and stuff like that. And I don't think I'm smart at all. Most of my ideas come from somebody else, Kurt McGregor or John Walton or, some of these other people. And then I disagree with a lot of them on different things as well. So, I just want to say that up front, because a lot of times, how psychology shows that people who are contradicted, or people who are presented with beliefs that contradict theirs, tend to cling tighter to their beliefs. So I say all that so that people don't go, oh, this guy thinks he's smart or whatever, right? I'm not. I just want to make that clear. I don't think that at all, right? I just like having these conversations. So, and then the last point is just to say that, or just to shill, really. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Converse Contender, where I like to contend in conversations. And it's a pretty small channel. A lot of the atheists and theists and pagans and others were on a platform called G Plus way back in the day, and we used to do these Google Hangouts. And so a lot of people remember me from back then. And I quit YouTube for a long time and came back with my new channel about 2 years ago, almost 2 years. And I mainly do interviews and live streams sometimes with people come in to debate. And I'll be having Dr. Michael Heiser on. I'll be having Dr. Liz Jackson coming on, Dr. Kurt McGregor next week. So, a lot of things like that. I like to hear from the scholars, and then I like to have discussions about, helping me clarify and think about some other things as well.
Okay, very good.
Thanks for having me, though.
You are certainly welcome. And a link to Converse Contender's channel is in the description of this video. So if you would like to check out some of his content, or if you'd like to watch any of the upcoming shows, the link is there, and you could just copy that and find his channel and go subscribe to him if you so choose. As far as what I have coming up, I'm working on a couple of videos. I'm working on the second part of my children's series, Why Am I an Atheist, taught at a 6-year-old level. And Junie the Apostate has contributed to that project. I'm also trying to talk Surus into doing a collab project with me to respond to Standing for Truth. And I had to get a little help on that one from Steve Bowman, because one area I know absolutely nothing about, it's geology. And we ended up, and I couldn't believe it, 2 minutes into the video, we were into geology. So I had
the way it goes.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yep. But Steve Bowman gave me some great help with the geology on that one. And next week, I've got someone that I'm trying to talk into coming on for a show next week, but I haven't got it set yet. So I'm not sure what we'll do as far as live stream goes next week. But thank you to...
Can I show? Let me show one more thing. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm a moderator, and I help to set up debates for Modern Day Debate. And right now, James has this thing going on to try and fund this debate for Matt Dillahunty and Dr. Kenny Rhodes. Sorry if I'm messing that up. Dr. Kenny Rhodes, I believe. So right now we're trying to raise some money to pay these gentlemen for their time. Usually a lot of times people just come on and debate, even no matter their status. But James is such a nice guy that he wants to just he's like, let's give him money anyway. So he's trying to, and I just got to be honest, like the same thing with me. I tell him, how many times have I told him, look, you don't have to pay him for this, right? I'll do it. I'll volunteer because it's, I like it doing it. And he's like, no, a worker's worth his wages, right? And so he just wants to give them money. And so if you guys would, you should definitely give to that. I think it's on Indiegogo this time. And, I know you've had Matt Dillahunty on. I'm sure that
I have.
So some of the money goes to him as well. So it's all going to the speakers. And sorry, I just wanted to shield that before we go because I just thought about it. So
Okay,
thanks.
very good. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for coming. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you, Converse Contender, for being willing to come on the show. It has been a pleasure having you. I have seen some things in your theology that are a little different than anything that I have seen before, which is very unusual because I was a Christian for 42 years, and having been a military wife, moving from region to region, I've changed churches, at least 100 times in those 42 years. Well, probably not 100, but certainly a lot of times.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I'll take that as a compliment. And maybe we can talk about next time or some other time about why I think this fits the Bible the best or something like that, so.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming, and live your life.
Thanks. See you guys.